1980s in Vietnam has a huge impact on me because that's my childhood. Right before I left Vietnam in 1990, left when I was 13, and so for that entire 1980s, it's kind of like time freeze for me. Since I went back to Vietnam in 2007, seeing the Saigon disappear and change to the cities changing and the old Saigon disappearing, I guess unconsciously, I'm trying to find a way to capture it and preserve it for myself, for the younger generation, for my parents' generation. And also the new Saigon, the new Vietnam is not very inspiring for me. So I just find myself drawn to the story of Saigon in the past.
During the 80s, we had lots of cousins and family coming to stay with us, and they shared lots of their own memories. And since I didn't live in Vietnam, those memories were the ones I have, even though I wasn't there. And it's quite different from him, but at the same time, it also built an idea of what their Vietnam or what their Saigon was. So I think it was very interesting for me to find how Leon put that into image and in the story and in the narratives, because actually it felt extremely familiar for me.
Dr. An's father was the composer for Stanza Papaya. That's a little fun fact. With sound design for the film, I think a lot of it came from the fact that I want to use the sound to help the audience recognize the time and place, because we don't have a lot of big scenes. We don't show a lot of the CD, the big scope of the CD. So I was trying to use sound to signify the time and place, the period for the audience, especially Vietnamese audience. When they hear those sound cues, they know exactly where this story takes place. Just lucky to have a very talented team of the sound designer who also worked on my previous film. And I think a lot of those background sound is very specific. It has a specific place in my mind growing up in Vietnam. And now the city's changed a lot, but if you go into those old apartment buildings, especially working class building, the working class area in Vietnam, you're still able to find those places. And that's one of the reasons why when I finished the script in America, I always moved back to Vietnam for at least a year, move into rent one of units in those apartment places, apartment buildings, to experience and feel and hear and be reminded of what it feels like, and then I can put it into the film. Sometimes you just forget. I live in New York, and I can write a script for a couple of years, but it still doesn't have the juice, the feeling of the real Vietnam. I have to go back to Vietnam and immerse myself in that situation, in those places, in order to recreate them. Half of the building you saw on film is abandoned, and the other half they use it as a school to teach music, and it's a kind of like a community center. So we just rent the entire thing for a few months, and we reconstruct, we rebuild, and we decorate it to make it like the building in 1980s. And luckily, the building that you saw, it's District 5 in Vietnam, which is the Chinatown area in Vietnam, Chinatown district. So it has, it's the only district in Saigon that's still kind of like somewhat intact architecturally. And that's why, that is also why you don't see a lot of big wide shot, because we just can't recreate that with our budget, with what the city is nowadays. Evidence storyboard, for me, it just doesn't make sense, because we don't really understand what's going to be happening on set, the structure of the set, how I'm going to be inspired by the props and the lighting. So usually I always spend at least 1 or 2 months rehearse with the actors, but we just go through the script, we break down the script, rehearse the lines, and find the characters, but I don't do blocking. And then we only go on set before we start a scene. Then we start like, hey, let's figure out how we're gonna block the scene. And then my DP comes in and we show it to him. Then he starts lighting the scene, and then we figure out camera's angle after. And the reason there's not a lot of movement, because it takes a long time to shoot, and we just don't have the luxury of time to do a lot of movement shots, because those takes time as well. And if something goes wrong, we have to start all over again. So somehow that just became a thing, and now I just prefer not a lot of movement. With the set, those are basically the color scheme that very popular during the 1980s in most households because there's limited options back then. That's how we started because we want to make people bring people back to the 1980s. So I try to recreate that as much as possible. So the green, the blue, the yellow is very iconic of the time and place. And then we start from that to go with the costume and the lighting and everything else. People think that we add a lot of color and the correction to make things look retro and old. We actually don't. That's how basically how it really look on set. And with the fact that we shoot on 35, it just adds on another layer. And the grain and the texture of the wall because it's real building, even though we rebuilt a lot of it and we decorated and it's somewhat it's a set, but the structure of it is real. So I think the time, the history to it, those are something that we cannot fake. The color, I try to with the actors and the color of the costume and the fabric and the curtains and like all together. I just try to see. I start with the building as I said, the set, and then I go with the characters. We start going from the beginning to the end. Like which scene I'm trying to convey. I'm not gonna have Pinam wearing a red bright shirt. If I know that scene is gonna be a sad scene, for instance, and then we just develop from there. And then we have to put all the characters in one scene together to see if everything goes together, if everything clash, and so just like one step at a time, and then we come up with the color palette. The song, also that song is a very iconic song. The main song that you hear, Ben Zhang Do, that we chose somehow. At the beginning, I had another song that I really liked, but then after a while, I realized that I really like the song, but it doesn't feel right for the character of Mr. Hao to like the song. And it sounds like something that the director is just forcing his character to listen to. So then that's when I chose the second choice, which is Ha Tang. So the one that I really liked, I put at the end credit. But you can hear the tone of two singers very similar. But I decided to go with Ha Tang for the theme song for the film. Because the song is fitted, the lyrics fit for the scene. As you can see, we have about like 20 songs in the film, and getting copyrights for those songs was a nightmare because most of the composer has passed away, and all of these songs are mostly were composed before 1975. So when people fled Vietnam and chaos after like all of the copyright, who's really holding the rights, it's a big mess. So we have to track people down, and most of them has passed away. We have to track their children. They live in France. They live in America. We have to ask for their support. And at the end, very happy with the choices because to foreign audience, they may like it, but to the Vietnamese audience who can really understand it, they can really appreciate the music choices because the moment you hear the song and the moment you recognize the voices of the singers, this all signifies a certain time and place. So it's a lot of like hidden eggs that I put in there for the audience to enjoy. She was using the brick to prop the door open, and as you can see with the clock, her relationship with Kang is parallel with the relationship of the Little Prince and the fox, right? As the fox said, each day, if you say we're gonna meet at 4:30, by 3 o'clock, I'm already excited, and that's why we see at first Kang and Kinam, they're supposed to meet at 9 o'clock to start cooking, and then we start seeing the clock start earlier and earlier, and by 8:30, you already start seeing her propping the door open. When Kang and Kinam broke up, that's when you see that she closed the kitchen door, and now the brick is just there. The relationship now is the closed door. What I do is I would write a dialogue in Vietnamese, and then I would, during the rehearsal with the cast, I would let them improv and play the line of how they would say it to each other. And I think that's just how he feel the most natural to approach. And I would reconstruct the lines for them, and that's just how the way it came out, the most natural for them.